So good evening. Tonight we're here to talk about the financial forecast. And you might be wondering, why are we talking about it tonight? It's October. Well, the House Bill 96 and the biennial budget changed the 5-year forecast in November and May to a budget and 3-year forecast in August and February. August, just as we're starting the school year, and February update before we even get through halfway through the year. So it's going to be very difficult to project moving forward, but we'll do our best. So our mission is to ensure that all our students are valued, challenged, and guided along their pathway to success. And we're always keeping financial stability as one of our key pillars in running and operating the school district. So when we think about the forecast, we're also thinking about our operations. But for our community, for the board tonight, think about the operations of the school district, similar to running your household. Just add a couple zeros behind every payment that you personally make, and that's about what it's like to run the school district. Tonight we're going to do a district overview. We're going to look at our financial summary. We're going to review our revenue and expenditures. We're going to think about some challenges and opportunities and talk about next steps. So on the district overview, we align our resources to our instructional priorities, and our 3 goals in our one plan is instruction, classroom environment, and attendance. When we're looking at our financials, in our financial summary, we're always looking at our one plan and aligning our resources to those goals we just mentioned. Our 3% community partnership, which promises our community, if they support our levy cycle, that we will not grow our operations by more than 3% annually. Our cash reserves, we have a cash reserve policy which requires our district to maintain 3 months or about 25% of our expenditures as a cash reserve, and ongoing communication. We're wanting to make sure that we're continually communicating and being transparent with our community. We have a PAFR we send out every fall that summarizes the previous year. We have an annual budget document that we send out each summer to give the community an understanding of what the upcoming year's budget is. We have our forecast that we do twice a year. We do the forecast and then we give an update. And then we have our annual audit as well as our CAFR, which provides the community who wants to see the detailed notes and financial statements about the school district. So when we're looking at our cash flow and our cash balance policy, the line is our cash balance policy. Our fund balance is usually the lowest in December and June. We get most of our revenue from property taxes, which come mostly in August and February. So we have to make sure that we have funds available throughout the summer to pay for employees' contracts that have already earned their contracts but are being paid through the summer, and obligations for services and purchases that we've acquired but have not paid for yet. So when we talk about our revenues and expenditures, our revenue trend, this shows where our revenue has been and where it is and where it is projected to go. Our revenue increased significantly in 2020, which was from the November 2019 emergency levy that we passed, and again in 2024 from the reappraisal of 23 property valuations. This shows how the reappraisal in 23 increased property valuations. There's an update in 26. Updates are smaller than reappraisals, and then the projection in 29 of the next reappraisal. These assumptions are based on trend and history, and when levies are passed, taxes are flat. However, when you're at the 20 mil floor, you do get growth on update and reappraisal years, which means you have growth once every 3 years. When we're looking at our property tax allocation, 81% of our property taxes are paid by our local residents. 14% are from our commercial properties, and 4% comes from our public utility taxes. House Bill 96 also reduced the amount of growth we can receive on public utility taxes. The increase in public utilities moving forward, we'll be able to receive 25% of the growth instead of 100% as we have in the past. When we look at the history of property taxes, in 1975, which was right before 1976 and House Bill 920, commercial and residential properties were almost a 50-50 split. In 2023, with the last reappraisal, residential properties across the state are at 75% compared to commercial property at 25%. So the shift to residential properties has happened mostly since the Great Recession. You can see from back in 1975, the blue line is residential, the orange line is commercial, and it trended about the same until 1999 and then dipped down into 2007 right around the Great Recession, and has then stayed on that same trajectory where residential is picking up more than the commercial properties to get to the 100%. In 2019, our effective millage rates increased almost to 50 mills, or voted millage, but our effective rate has decreased and is actually reduced 4.84 mills. As values go up, millage goes down, but the dollar amount stays the same. So when we're looking at local funding that we receive, the blue bars are the state funding formula for base cost. This is what the state has determined each year in the school funding formula, what the base cost for education is. The green line is what has been required of our local community towards the school funding formula. And as you can see, over time, we've gone from 60% to 80% required by our local community, which means the state has paid the inverse. However, you can see the state funding trends for other school district types. It's the same base cost, and then what they're paying for K-8 and 9-12 vouchers, as well as community schools, and then the orange line is the state funding for Northwest Local School District, which is heading to 10%, which is the state minimum state share. But with funding, not only is it the cost and what the funding formula says, but there's also caps and guarantees. So the state's able to say, this is the funding formula, locally you should receive this, the state should pay the difference. However, if it's too much, the state caps it, and they only send the amount up to the cap. As you can see clear back to 2016, the red bars show the amount of money that the school district was supposed to receive from the state but did not. In 2020 and 21, the lighter shaded bars are because the state cut our funding when the pandemic hit. They cut us $800,000 in the month of May. Our year ends in June. And it was $400,000 in 21. And then as we have been talking over the past year, as the state does not increase the inputs in the funding formula, but property values and local income go up, it makes our community look wealthier, which pushes us now onto the guarantee and will push us further onto the guarantee. So this is our projection. We're $2.6 million projected onto the guarantee this year. We have been a formula district. This will be the first year we're onto the guarantee, but projected to $12 million. When the state revenue per student is around $1,500 per student, it's going to take several students to make up $12 million. But then also looking at historic funding formulas prior to the Fair School Funding Plan, we received more revenue. And then the Fair School Funding Plan was being phased in, which reduced the amount of revenue we were receiving from the state. And as Senator Blessing just mentioned previously, if the inputs were actually increased and the funding formula phased in completely, we would receive more revenue.
You should have asked him to stay and listen to
send him a copy. So the basic funding formula is for basic education only, not for anything above basic. Anything above basic and infrastructure has to be locally funded at 100%. But the funding formula, the state local share, is for basic education. The blue bar is what the state requires Northwest Local School residents to pay for the basic education. The green bar is what we collect on the 20 mil floor, which doesn't even pay for basic education. The gray bar is what we collect with our 2 emergency levies. When you add the green and the gray together, we're $962,000 above basic education to pay for all the things that our community and our students want above basic education. When the state's looking at how to fund their formula, they have different factors that they take in, such as our student population and our student demographics, property valuations in each local community, personal income of district residents, and looking at, they call it limits and guarantees, I call it caps and guarantees, but it's what they guarantee that you at least get and cap you at will not pay you more than. But school funding is a partnership between the state and local governments, and the state comes up with the funding formula. They look at each district's local community capacity, which is property valuation and residential income. They take the formula, less local capacity, and the state pays the difference. In 1997, which was pre-Duroff, the state's average share across the state was 43%. When Duroff passed, they came the closest they've ever come to being 50-50, state-local partnership. And in 2027, with the current biennial budget, the state will have its lowest state share in history. And Northwest Local School District, as I just mentioned, is headed to the lowest state share of 10%. So it was 43% pre-Duroff. It went up to 45% with the Duroff lawsuit. It's flatlined through the Great Recession. So for a decade, school funding was flat. And then in 22, with the Fair School Funding Formula, that brought state share back up. It goes up every other year because the base inputs, they flatline for 2 years. So 22 and 23 was at fiscal 18 costs, even though we were operating in 22 and 23. 24 and 25 were fiscal 22 costs, and they've kept it at 22 costs. So we're in 26 and 27 being funded at what it cost the average school districts across the state in fiscal 22, as valuations and local incomes go up. And the state share down to the minimum, its lowest ever at 32%. And again, this is why. Property values go up, incomes go up, but the base costs remain the same in prior years. It makes the scales of the formula uneven, making local communities look wealthier in the formula and having the state share reduced. When we're looking at the current state funding formula, locally, and this is just for basic education, locally our community has to pay $6,600 per student, while the state is paying $1,500 per student. That's 81% of our basic costs for education is being paid by our local community. And during this forecast, it is headed to 90%. When we're looking at all of our revenue, 55% is from local property taxes plus other sources, 27% is from the state in total, and 18% is from the federal government in grants that we receive. However, when we're looking at our grants, fiscal 26 is what we're currently allocated to receive based on our students and our needs. The proposal for 27 is what is currently being discussed at the federal government when they're talking about the budget that they're wanting to pass, and that is reducing the federal grants that we'll receive as a district. Our federal grants pay for positions that offer additional services for our students. Without those grants, we will not be able to offer additional services that our students need. So when we're looking at our overall revenues, 67% comes from our local property taxes plus other revenue. Other revenue includes our Green Township TIF, interest revenue, tuition from other schools. 26% is coming from the state funding formula, and another 6% is coming from the state tax credits, which is the 12.5% the state is picking up for our local residents and paying on their behalf. Now shifting over to expenditures, this graph shows the trend of where we've been, where we are, and where we're projected to go. And this also is while we're maintaining our 3% partnership with our community to not increase our operations by more than 3% annually, but there are unfunded mandates that the state continues to put on us, like high-dose tutoring, that we have to incur the cost, special education services and needs. Students move in, have additional services, things that are out of our control. Utilities are another one with the AI demand is driving energy costs. But when you break it down, $65 per student per day is what it costs to educate our children here at Northwest Local School District. And 72% we spend in the classroom on our kids instructionally every day. To give us perspective, the blue bar is what we spent year over year. The orange is the change in inflation. And in 2024, we had $30 million in transfers that popped that bar up. That's one-time cash that shows up as an expenditure, but we were moving money from the general fund to our master facilities fund to help our community in the building of master facility projects, which then ended up being for Colerain Elementary. When we're looking at our expenditures, 76% of our expenditures are spent on salaries and benefits. This is in our people. We're a service industry. We provide services for our students, and so 76% of our budget is in our people. 18% is purchase services. As I said, special education is a large one there, as well as utilities. Supplies are 3%. Supplies make up not only the parts and materials, the fuel for our buses, the paper, toilet paper, paper towels, classroom materials. Capital outlay is almost 2%, and that's because we have the catastrophic plan last year and this year, but usually that's less than 1%. So when we're looking at our salaries and benefits, since that's the majority of our expenditures, our benefits are increasing faster than our salaries, and our health insurance alone is over half of our benefits total. And this is actually projection as staffing is going down, because we reduced staffing this year, and we are projected to reduce staffing every year just because our enrollment is changing. And we utilize our staffing plan, which mirrors our enrollment. So when we look at our revenues and expenditures together, this does not include levies that are currently on the books that are expiring. This is a projection of our revenue. This is a projection of where our expenditures are going and the difference. This is what it does to our cash balance. The two high years were when we did transfers. We transferred $10 million for our phase 1 of our master facility plan for our 3 elementaries, and then we transferred $30 million in 24 for our master facilities fund. Other than that, that's our cash balance. The black line is our cash balance policy. And you can see we start deficit spending in 26 and then go down to about a negative $2 million as our levies expire without additional revenue. So on our levy cycle, this is where we've been, where we are now, and what is going to happen during this financial forecast. We passed our resolution to maintain 3% operations as well as needing additional revenue in 2023. We are projecting to not need that till 28. So we've extended a 3-year levy to 8 years. We have an emergency levy that is expiring in November of 27, or December 31st of 27, and that includes tax credits, because that one was passed originally before 2013. So when that levy expires, those tax credits for our community go away, with the recent veto at the state level that does not allow us to renew that and keep those tax credits for our community and taxpayers. And then the other one that's expiring is December 31st of 29. It's an $11.3 million emergency levy that's going to expire. When we look at our bow tie effect, we talk about how when levies are passed, because they're flat when passed, you have to ask for more than you need at the time, because the levies are flat when passed, so you collect more in the beginning years to spend in the later years, and then after you start deficit spending and spending that down, then you have to ask for an additional levy. So that's the levy cycle. We have a 5-year rolling levy cycle is what we follow. In 24, that was really $12 million surplus, but with the $30 million transfer, it took it the other way, but that's the impact of that. So in 26, we're slightly deficit spending, but we knew this was coming as we're getting further into our levy cycle. We'll deficit spend throughout this whole forecast, which means about 2028, we need additional revenue in addition to what we already have with 2 expiring levies. The assumptions that we've used throughout the forecast, the factors that we looked at were maintaining our current operations, however, utilizing our staffing plan, which, as I talked about, reduce staffing each year based on our staffing plan. The Medicaid reimbursement actually will increase revenue and expenditures in our forecast. Previously, we were allowed to reduce the expenditure if it happened in the same year. And then after the Medicaid audit was done, we would report that as a refund of prior year expenditure. The state has changed that effective for this fiscal year, which says that all Medicaid reimbursement is to be shown as a revenue and show the true expenditures that were being reimbursed on as an expense. So it's going to increase the expenditures and it'll increase the revenue, but have a net effect on the forecast. And then the 27 emergency levy renewal, what's happening at the state level and what our options are. We also have a one-time impact that occurred last year and again this year for our catastrophic plan for the preschool renovation and the Northwest Career Center transitions renovation. It's about $3 million in total for all our catastrophic plan projects. And then challenges as we're looking through the forecast and operations of our special needs services, our special education services and needs. Special education is almost 30% of our overall operating budget. The biennial budget base cost input's not increasing. The national and local enrollment decline that's happening, utility costs based on AI demands and utilization that's driving up cost. Our foster and homeless transportation, another unfunded mandate. At the state level and the federal level, the changes in the state school funding formula and now the federal grants, as well as property tax reform that we heard a little bit about earlier this evening. Our aging buildings and deferred maintenance, as we've looked at what we've received in funding and the caps, and barely receiving basic education, infrastructure, and maintenance are all 100% locally funded, which over the years we've not had the additional funds to maintain those, so we do have a lot of deferred maintenance throughout the district. And then emergency levy renewals Can we renew them? As of last week, that no longer is an option. And then looking at opportunities, this year we were able to reduce our operations by $2 million based on our staffing plan. We have Colerain Elementary, so we're doing the OFCC Segment 1 project without needing to go to our community for a bond. And then in the future, looking at how to consolidate buildings and operations. We've talked about combining middle schools, things like that, and just looking at, again, with a staffing plan, how we can adjust operations as we move forward. When we look at the 27 and 29 renewals and their impact on the forecast, not renewals, they are expiring. The blue bar is our revenue, the red bar is our expenditures, and the line is our cash balance. This is our cash balance. If the money that we collect now, we renew some way and have that revenue source again, which is the orangish line. That is what we're currently collecting that will expire throughout the forecast and that we'll need to replace. However, when you look at 2030, you can see that our revenue still does not meet our expenditures. So around 2028, we're going to need an additional revenue source. We could ask I'll save that for a moment. So this shows the same chart we looked at earlier with the current levies that are expiring. If we were to renew them in some way and maintain that revenue source, where our revenue would go, where our expenditures would go. And as you can see, even as of 2030, we are barely above our expenditures. And so projecting that out even further is going to show where our expenditures are going to start exceeding our revenue. And remember, our cash balance policy says that we're required to maintain 60 days, or about 25%, 3 months worth. So as we're deficit spending, we're eating into our cash balance, and by 2030, we're almost at our cash balance policy. And this is what the same graph we looked at earlier that was negative $2 million. If we maintain the revenue that we're receiving with our expiring 27 and 29 levies, this is what we'll look like. But as you see, we're still dipping below our cash balance policy. So our next steps, we need to continue to align our resources and achieve our one plan goals. Continue to look at our state funding and advocate for additional state funding. We have our Colerain Elementary OCC Segment 1 project, which we are building. We have property tax reform that is currently happening. We heard a lot about that this evening. We have our emergency levy for 27 and 29 that are both expiring. And we have a need for additional revenue. The longer we wait to pass additional revenue, the larger the amount needs to be, because everything compounds. The expenditures start compounding, the revenue is a flat dollar amount. Plus, we need to figure out what we're going to do now that the emergency levies, one, we cannot renew, and two, are no longer an option. So as a district, as a board, we need to decide how we're going to replace revenue that we currently operate on and have been operating on most of it, or half of it, since 2012, as well as what our options are for new revenue. These are the two emergency levies that we have been talking about this slide for several years now, and when they expire. And because of the property tax reform and the veto that happened last week, we can no longer replace those levies. Emergency levies are not an option for us. So this will continue to increase and pass school funding onto our local community, reducing the burden on the state, because it takes away the state tax credits that they're currently paying for our community, and it just limits our options. And this is what the state looks at. This graph includes both our emergency levies if we maintain that revenue. And when you hit a 2% revenue shortfall, that's a warning, that's caution, sorry, it's fiscal caution. 8% is a fiscal warning, and 15% is a fiscal emergency. And if we start reducing the revenue we're already receiving, plus the new revenue we know we're going to need shortly after that, that chart's going to look drastically different. Can I answer any questions?
I'm not trying to give you a gotcha here, but I'm a little curious. When the reappraisals went through, I distinctly remember you saying we would get very little. At most, I think we were going to get $1 million from the reappraisals. A lot of people, they're still upset about that. But when you showed that chart, it looked like we got about $6 million. So which is correct?
That was valuation.
Well, you showed the chart, the revenue that came in, and it looked like we got about $6 million extra from the reappraisals.
So over the 5-year forecast, it was $13 million, and that's the $13 million that we used to transfer funds in advance for Colerain Elementary.
Okay.
If you remember at the time when we did the transfer, we took, because local revenue goes up, state revenue goes down.
I'm not sure I follow you, but I know that it just seemed like some people, especially in the poorer areas, their reappraisal rates went way up. Mine weren't bad, but some people had 30, 40% increases. And, that's just a tough pill to swallow when you got to write that check in January and in June. And I'm not sure why the state views us as a wealthy school district, but that's always defied logic to me. But anyway, I just had that question.
So part of it was, it brought us down just below the 20 mil floor, but from where we're at to the 20 mil floor, there's no increase in revenue. And then when it dips slightly below, we got the increase of revenue from right below to the 20 mil floor. But as local value went up, state revenue went down. So the net effect over that 5-year forecast at the time was $13 million. When we transferred the 20 million, that was part of that transfer, which helped so we took that investment from our community in advance and moved it to a master facility fund to help our community with our infrastructure needs, which is currently funding and building Colerain Elementary.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thanks, Amy. I know you speak to community groups and that. I think with what you're showing of the future and that we need to get ahead of that and be at, maybe not this entire presentation, but can we get to one PTA meeting a month? I mean, those are parents that are out talking to the community and get these facts out. And then maybe on Fridays, we post a financial Friday fact or something and take snips from this, because the general parents and public are not aware of most of the things in this. So I'm just trying to think of ways that we can start now to educate people with what's coming in the next few years.
Yep, we're always trying to continue to educate and look for opportunities, so absolutely.
Okay, so we can expect hopefully some of those and I'd love to hear other ways that you're educating our community on this. And
The notes that are attached to the agenda that detail the 5-year forecast, if people read it.
they don't.
This presentation that
way.
gets sent out to staff and community, different groups, I mean,
Yeah,
we're
social
trying.
media is a big part of people's day. So if we can we have district Instagram and Facebook. If we can put a fact out every week from here, I think even that would be helpful. There's a lot of people that share that page. So.
And it's also helpful because it's pretty much the same story we've been telling for several years. So just that repetitive conversation.
Yeah, but
helps
breaking
over
it down.
time.
No one's, I think this is very valuable, but a normal parent isn't going to read through this entire thing, but if we can pull the facts about the state funding and local and just take something that will catch their attention and break it down, I think that would be really helpful for people to see.
Absolutely.
This is probably crazy, but why can't all the public school districts sue the state of Ohio?
We are,
I mean, but suing them about vouchers, right?
right now, yes, because DeRolf was about funding,
Yeah, I mean,
and then they've already lost it, they've just never
so why
done anything
can't,
about it.
what do we do to have them held accountable?
It's gone to the Supreme Court 3 times, and the Supreme Court finally said there's nothing more they can do, it's up to the legislature. So I guess
The
it's,
legislator's not doing anything about that decision. Nothing. They've done in 30 years.
I mean, they're not holding up their very basic thing of providing public education to their communities, their residents. Why do we accept that? Why does the community accept that? Guess if we knew the answer, we wouldn't be in this spot, and I don't know how you really reach people, because people don't want to fill out surveys about how they want to hear about things. People don't come to community engagement before the meetings. People, very few that it looks like watch the board meetings online. Whenever I've looked, it's maybe a few hundred people. So how do you get information to people who aren't willing to delve into the information that's already put out there for them? I don't think it's a lack of us always trying to put information out. I think it's a lack of interest in the information that's put out.
I also think it's the ripple effects, that there's over 40,000 registered voters, and there's Amy, and if I am out there helping her, it's Amy and I think it's the ripple effects. It's every single person who hears this story continuing to talk about it in their circles, with their family, with their friends, at the soccer field, wherever you're at. Because a lot of times when Amy and I are talking, people are like, well, that's so far-fetched, that doesn't sound real, that can't be true, you're missing something, or they just don't trust us because it sounds that way. But when they hear it from their neighbor, their friend, their family member, their teacher, their cafeteria worker, their bus driver, as long as everybody that is connected to us stays engaged and continues to go out and talk to other people, that's how I think it continues to get out there. It's the ripple effects.
Do you know how any other districts get their information out to people? Like, I think Princeton passed a levy last year or the year before, how they got information out to people to make them understand the issue? In what format did they use that made people understand it, that they actually looked at the information?
no, we share ideas, we pretty much are talking about the same thing. Each community is different, so it may have been what was on the reduction list at the time. I don't know.
I think just some communities are just more engaged for public education than other communities.
So then do we as a board need to come up with a list of what reductions are gonna happen if we don't pass something? And
Well,
have,
we're going to have to come up with some list.
well, I mean, and actually have public forums that people can come and talk to us and
Yeah.
ask us. And hopefully we have backup education with one of these two who know more of the facts or are better versed in the facts than we are. But I think we probably need to start doing that sooner rather than later.
Well, there are things, and Amy, you can jump in, but when we get to a point where there is a possible significant reduction because of a revenue source that's going away that needs to be replaced, we've talked about this before, that there are some guidelines and rules from the state about what Amy and I can say, and until there is something that, at that point, we have, that the board has said, this is what will go away if the revenue source expires, then that gives us the ability to do that. So that would be something that, as we approach some of those timelines and deadlines that Amy's laid out, that would be part of that process. But there's a lot of steps along the way that we have to figure out before we get to that list.
Okay, so this evening, Daryl and I are asking the board approve this October financial forecast and assumptions, as well as the revenue increases that have been listed in the forecast. Last year, we approved it with the 2027 emergency renewal, but that is no longer an option. So just the revenue, that would be the same as what we're currently operating on, included in the forecast is what you would be voting on, unless you want it to be different. Because I have to file it with the state. And that's the revenue that's listed on the forecast, is what we currently have, just coming back in some way. Just the dollar amount, it doesn't say the how.
What can I do?
It will send us into financial fiscal emergency, and then they'll come down.
You need a motion?
Need a motion in a second.
Do you need a motion, Amy?
That she just read.
Oh, okay. Well, so moved on that motion. Second.
Do we have a second?
Yeah, second.
When is the work group?
November 5th.
Do we have to file it before then, or can we get in detail about it then?
Did you hear that? Do we have to file it before the November 5th work session?
The forecast? It has to be filed by October 15th.
Oh.
There's an update in February, so if plans change, the February forecast would get amended.
Okay, and that passes without opposition.
All right, so for general updates for tonight, just a couple of reminders for dates. Next Monday, the 13th, we have our State of the District at Northwest High School at 6 p.m. We also have on October 16th, the groundbreaking for Corrigan Elementary at 5 p.m. So we're excited about those two events to kind of share the amazing things that are happening within the district, but also to really kind of start that process for the groundbreaking in the building of Corrigan Elementary. A couple of other important dates. We have the end of the first quarter coming up. So Friday, October 17th is an in-service day, and Monday is a fall break on October 20th. So the kids have a 4-day weekend that weekend. We talk about our one plan and how important it is to have good attendance. Not just good attendance from our students to be here to learn, but our amazing staff to be here to support our kids. And so as we end toward the first quarter, just a brief update that our staff currently have an attendance rate of 95.7. We really use 95% as a benchmark. We know things happen and people have to be out, but 95%. So our staff are exceeding that benchmark by 0.7. Our student attendance right now is at 94.5, slightly below that benchmark, so challenging the students to step up and see if in the next update you can't exceed the staff attendance rate. So there's a little bit of competition. And then I just want to take a moment and share gratitude with all of the work that Amy and her team did to put the forecast together. It is complicated, and this tells the story not only of where we are as a district, but how we got here through a lot of things that are no fault of the district, changes in legislation, and that stark graph that shows the decline in state share of public education over the years from what it was to its all-time low. So just some gratitude for being able to tell a very complicated story in a way that is compelling, but also extremely accurate. Thanks.
Nicole, comments?
Yeah, I'd just like to thank Senator Blessing and Butler Tech for their being here tonight and their presentations. I've learned a lot from Senator Blessing this evening. Just also like to ask everyone to continue to remember the young lady that was hurt at the parade in their prayers, as well as a former student here, Dylan, who was hurt in an accident over the weekend. Thank you.
Mark?
Yeah, I want to thank Senator Blessing. Go home and take some Tylenol after all that. Just amazing. Really appreciated the preschool presentation. That was awesome. It's a great group of kids. And that's about it.
Jim?
Yeah, I want to thank Dr. Sprinkles, Superintendent Butler Tech, coming and giving an overview on what's coming to our district and the new courses and stuff that our kids could be available to get and to take at our 3 other locations. And thank Megan for coming and giving us an update on Houston, the preschool. And thanks, Amy, for your report.
Chris?
Yeah, I want to concur with Jim on the report, Amy. I can only imagine there's big numbers and crunching them and making charts, how difficult that must be. So you did a good job on it. And I know it's always concerning to you beforehand that you're going to be nervous, but you seem fine. So thank you very much. That's it.
All right, and just say I'm quite overwhelmed with all this. It's a lot to think about. It's a lot to try and relay to people. First, to understand it all yourself, and then to try and express that to other people who may even have less knowledge than you do about the issues that we're facing. I really think we need people to tell us how you want us to contact you, how you want us to get information out to you. You have every one of our emails. You can certainly email us. You can come to community engagement before a meeting and tell us what best works for you. But we can put everything on social media. If you don't read it, it doesn't matter. We can put it in every school's newsletter. If you don't read it, it doesn't matter. People like short, succinct things, but if it doesn't interest them, they still might not even look at it. So we really need to put our heads together and brainstorm is what our best way is that we're going to approach people, get the information out, and try and make sure that they understand these are the repercussions if we don't make changes, and that it may end up coming down to another levy needing to be passed. It may come down to an earned income tax needing to be passed. We don't know at this point. But if you want your kids to continue to learn well, if private schools want some of these services that the public schools provide, then they all need to be on board and realize that the people working here are working very hard to educate children, to bring them up, to make them safe, to make them competent, to go on to the next level of education and then out into the work world. And nothing in life comes free, nothing comes without a cost. And if you don't think education of our children is the most important thing that we can do for the current and next generations, I think you need to rethink it and really have a soul-searching talk with yourself, because if we don't have educated children, we don't have a good society. So please definitely think about it, and please reach out to us if you have any means that you think are a better way for us to get the information out to you. I think we're all very interested in getting the information out, and we want what's best for the district. So please help us to help you. With that, we are going to have an executive session this evening. After the session, we will not be doing any further action. So if I can get Daryl, if you want to speak.
Yeah, so we have a motion to move into executive session to consider confidential information related to negotiations with other political subdivisions regarding requests for economic development assistance. With that, the superintendent recommends the board approve the motion to executive session as listed.
Can I have a motion and a second? Okay, we can vote. And that passes without opposition, and we will move on to executive session.